Hi, and thank you for inviting me here today to speak to you about accompanying families of children with serious illness. I am actually a graduate of the University of Rochester, as is my husband, so this is a truly big honor for me. And in an odd coincidence, the rare disease that my son had was discovered by Dr. Sanfilippo while he was at the University of Rochester Medical Center. I have nothing to disclose here today, and these are our objectives for our session here today. Look at all these beautiful faces of families who have contributed to Courageous Parents Network, an educational tool that we will talk more about later. What do you think is going through these parents' minds? What are they feeling? What are they worried about? What are they seeing, anticipating, wishing? What questions do you think are running through their heads? I can tell you a few. Why is this happening to my child, to my family? How will I provide for my child's care now and in the future as the needs become greater? Will I be able to advocate for all the things my child needs in the community, at school, in the medical setting? What about my other children? Will I be able to be there for them and my marriage? What will happen to that? These are just a few of the many questions that families like mine have, and I am sure in your positions, you could name many more of them. But I can tell you two questions they wonder and worry about, but rarely ever ask. What do I hope for now? And who will be with me as I do this incredibly hard thing? To, for, and with, these are such tiny words. They're words we rarely ever think about when we speak them, but they are honestly words that have a big impact on the health and well-being of families like mine. My name is Jennifer Siedman, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Courageous Parents Network. But more importantly, I am the mom to 3 children. My son Benjamin was diagnosed with Sanfilippo syndrome at the age of 15 months old. There he is in the top left-hand corner, looking cute and curly. The bottom left-hand corner is Ben at about the age 13. That's when he uttered his last words. I can see him trying to purse his lips to form a word, but what you probably see is just a little boy smiling. And on the right, there in his wheelchair, Ben in his last years of life. Most of you who are involved in neurological diseases will see that he's suffering a spinal curve and, of course, dystonia. Throughout Ben's life, I had a deep sense of a need to have partners, those that were with me on this journey. But it wasn't until he was about 14 and my husband and I were trying to decide if Ben was going to have his spine fused that I became aware of how great a difference having a medical provider who truly was accompanying you could make, and just how much I needed that support to feel good about the job I was doing as his parent. The support I needed came in the form of a referral to the palliative care team. I know with this audience, I would be preaching to the choir if I were to tell you that that referral came far too late in my son's journey, as it does for so many families. But what I will share with you here today is that it did not come because I was worried about Ben and the decision that was right for him, but rather because I was worried about my other 2 children. I knew Ben might not survive this surgery, and somehow I felt confident I could decide if it was right for him. I was practiced at that by then. What I did not know, what I felt less confident in, was how it would impact my other children. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that if I could not sort out how to make this decision with my other 2 children, even as it was for Ben, I would have felt that I had failed as both Ben's parent and as theirs. I can tell you this. I tell you this today because my family saw how vitally important it was for a provider to see beyond the patient and to see the whole family. This is a quote by a physician, and it is directed towards other physicians. But in my work at Courageous Parents Network, I often use this quote with families as we talk about the journey that they are on, how to maintain their marriages, tend the siblings, work with their child's school, or find a supportive group of friends. What I tell them is that you have to figure out how to be with your family members, and how and when to find or ask for others to be with you. I tell them that finding your withs, the people and things that truly accompany you, that puzzle alongside you, will allow you to understand that you are truly being the best parent, spouse, and friend you know how to be. And that when you know you are able to do that, you feel less isolated, better equipped, and in the end, it is likely that you will have less regrets. And then I tell them, and now you hear today, that there is actually research that supports this. The original work began with Dr. Pamela Hines. She interviewed parents with cancer, asking two seemingly simple, but actually very revealing things of parents. Share with me your definition of being a good parent for your child at this point in your child's life, and describe the actions from others that would help you in your efforts to be a good parent to your child now. The study identified these good parent definitions: making informed, unselfish decisions in the child's best interest, remaining at the child's side, showing the child that he or she is cherished, teaching the child to make good decisions if they can participate in those decisions, advocating for the child with the staff, and promoting the child's health. Now, I know many of you might be feeling or thinking right now, because I had the same response when I first read the research and heard about the term good parent. It is important for me to tell you that the term good parent emerged from the parents themselves, and to stress that in no way did the research imply that there was the opposite, a bad parent. The research has evolved over the years. Later studies found differences between the groups of parents based on certain decisions they had made on their child's behalf, and also that fathers, mothers, and single parents ranked the values differently. Nevertheless, doing what they believed was right for their child in their current situation has been a constant theme. So what gets in the way of parents establishing themselves as feeling like they have been a good parent to their child? Well, for parents of children living with life-threatening conditions, the inner emotional landscape is fraught with hopes, wishes, and complicated emotions. They have been redirected onto a scary path towards an uncertain and devastating future with little guidance and very, very high stakes. They are both driver and passenger in this journey. I think to understand more about the ways that you as medical providers can accompany parents to actually be with them, we must first look at the inner psychosocial and emotional landscape of parents and the factors that may inform their definition of being a good parent. I suspect much of this will not be new to you, but framing it in this way will help you understand how very, very hard it is for parents like myself to center our own good. Perhaps the greatest influence may be the natural and good parent instinct to keep our children safe. Parents, though, feel that they will fail their child, particularly in the context of making decisions about medical interventions. For some parents, this instinct can get interpreted as, it is my job to keep my child safe. If something bad happens to my child, I have failed at this most important job. Unfortunately, this fear is often exasperated by our culture, which resists the reality that bad things happen, that some things are out of our control and simply can't be conquered. Even hospital taglines have become problematic for parents. Noble and aspirational, such declarations like the one you see on your screen here leave a lot of parents feeling isolated and unseen, and only serve to increase their feelings of failure when things are not going well. There is also this intense feeling of helplessness at diagnosis. For the most part, this is a time when the world responds. I myself remember how many people circled around me after my son's diagnosis, helping me find resources, bringing me food, holding my hand as I cried. They were with me in my helplessness. But over time, the responses shifted and statements like, "I don't know how you do it," became more common. These statements created an internal pressure inside of me to maintain an illusion of control. But that control was not real. With each shift downward in my son's baseline, I felt a renewed sense of helplessness and a worry that I was not being a good parent to my son. Of course, the irony of this illusion that I maintained of control is that it became a barrier to others truly accompanying me and my family. Oh, parents worry that their child's quality of life is misunderstood. This is particularly true of parents of children with serious illness whose personalities may be hidden because of their complexities, as in the case of many neurodegenerative diseases like my son's. As parents, we become expert translators of our children's needs, wishes, likes, and hates. We worry so much that our child's quality of life is misunderstood, that others don't or can't see or know our children the way we do. And we worry about it most in school and in medical situations. Often these are not our children's best environments, and also they are places that only have short bits of time to truly know our children and require intentional and specific efforts to know them. This need to have the world truly see my Ben had me dressing him in t-shirts and crazy socks that expressed his personality and creating elaborate storyboards to accompany him during his hospital stays. Interpreting your child and constantly feeling like you have to explain how their life has meaning despite of their problems is exhausting. And when others don't see them, as you feel that you have failed as their interpreter. This often caused me and my family to draw inwards, making it harder for others to accompany us. Parents also worry, and they worry a lot, that they will be misunderstood. This is another big worry that often comes forward more in school or in medical situations. Parents like us spend a lot of time fighting for the things we feel that our child needs. And while this might surprise some of you, we also spend a big chunk of time worrying about how the world perceives those efforts. This internal battle of worries impacts us as parents and our perception of ourselves as good parents. It also, unfortunately, serves as a barrier to families finding the support they need and the accompaniment they really need, because it forces others to back away from us. These are just a few of the worries that have been found to impact parents' perceptions of themselves as a good parent. So what can you as clinicians do about it? I believe that helping parents foster a good parent belief that they are and have been a good parent to their child is perhaps the best way you as clinicians can accompany families. So how do you go about doing that? Well, in fact, there was a qualitative study done with nearly 50 parents of children living with medical complexity, some bereaved, most still actively caring, that looked specifically at the role clinicians can play in fostering good parent beliefs. The care behaviors that parents reported as having an impact on their ability to achieve their good parent definition included truly seeing their child, communicating in a kind and caring way, and acknowledging the parents as experts in their child's care. Look at all of these yellow circles. These are the actions that you can take that will make such a difference in the lives of families. They aren't technical. They certainly aren't sophisticated or hard to understand. In fact, the humanity in each of us knows what these prompts mean. And I think that if you practice them, families will truly feel that you have been with them. When parents enter the hospital or a clinic, they expect medical competence. But what we hear at CPN, what they remember is care. How did you as clinicians make them feel? Did they feel seen, heard, and understood? Those little yellow circles are the key to all of that. And the good news here is that by fostering good parent beliefs, you will not only be helping the parents, but my guess is that you will likely be able to do a better job and you will feel better about the job you are doing. Because when you align with parents in this way, you build trust, which improves how the collaborative enterprise feels and creates a space where shared decision-making can truly happen. This may very well promote the well-being of you as clinicians when you care in this way. Now, I want to briefly turn my attention to a tool to assist you as you accompany parents and help them center their good. Courageous Parents Network, or CPN for short, is an online resource specifically addressing the needs of families caring for children with serious illness. The website and now mobile app features video interviews, blogs, podcasts, bringing the wisdom of parents who have gone before, as well as the guidance of palliative-minded clinicians to the parents who are facing these challenges today, to help them as their child's advocate, decision maker, and caregiver, to give them the language they need to understand their experiences, such as anticipatory grief and baseline, to offer permission to struggle with decisions and find the perspective that feels right for their child and for their family, and to reassure them as much as possible that they can face their child's end of life and the grief that may follow. All of this is there for them so that they might feel at the end of the day they have been a good parent to their child. Some of our resources, including 8 guides and 7 pathways, which are small learning modules on topics such as participating in a clinical trial or considering spinal fusion surgery, are also available in Spanish. We also have a section of our website designed specifically for clinician use. Unlike our parent-facing site, you must create a login to access this one. Now, it's free, and we promise not to bother you too much, but your membership allows us to better track the tools that are actually useful to you and make sure that we are providing more of them. In our clinician portal, you will find resources specifically designed for guiding families and educating yourself and trainees. Remember those little yellow circles of the activities you can do to help parents center their good and develop their confidence as good parents? This is the place on CPN where you will find the tools to help you do that. Finally and quickly, because I don't want to spend so much time talking about Courageous Parents Network, I want to make you aware of 2 other resources to help you in your practice. Available on our mobile app and coming very soon to our web app in the clinician portal is a feature we call Bundle and Share. This allows you to create a very small library of CPN resources, blogs, videos, guides that you can text or email to families you work with, personalizing the care that you give them, helping them to feel better seen by you. And because we know that you guys have limited time, we have expertly curated 5 bundles on hot topics. I'm not going to list them all, but experiencing the NICU, considering spinal fusion, and how to refer families to palliative care are just a few of the bundles that we've put together. I also want to make you aware of the live virtual events we host monthly. These events are largely targeted at parents and the topics that they are concerned about. But many providers come and attend these sessions to learn about the lived family experience. This month, we will be talking about the sibling experience. And in November, we will talk about spirituality, a topic that is often avoided out there in the ethos. At CPN, we interview and interact with dozens and dozens of parents. And the good parent theme is a constant. I wanted to leave you with 2 very explicit examples today. The first is from a blog by Mom Deborah after deciding not to have her daughter receive spinal fusion surgery and to instead go home and live the remaining 14 months of her life quietly and comfortably and with confidence. It was during this meeting that someone asked me for the first time, she writes, how do you think Cassie feels about being here and all the interventions that she is experiencing? With this one statement, I began to question what being a good parent was truly about. I answered, I think she absolutely hates being here. and all the invasiveness she is experiencing. It was then that I heard it was okay to say no, and that it would be coming from a loving place. And from CPN's video library, the voice of Mom Nikki, whose 2 sons had mitochondrial disease. At the time of this interview, both sons were living. Now both have died within 3 years of each other. And I have seen Nikki several times since, and I can attest to the fact that indeed she does not have regrets. She is filled with sadness and with missing, but also pride and peace for the life she helped to give her boys.
I think the one thing that gives me solace, it's going to be huge for me, is I know Avery would not be here if it wasn't for me. And I finally own that. Avery shouldn't be alive. Avery has had so many chances that he should have been gone. And the decisions that I've made for Avery, I think have kept him where he is. And so I've done right by him. I've made decisions that are right for him. And I know that when he leaves me and us as a family, I feel like he's going to be like, Mom, thank you. His body won't work. He's done. I don't know how he stays alive now, but I know it's the love that he gets. It's a higher level. It's not anything mechanical. I think it's really just out of love, and he will leave me and us, Janessa, Isaiah, even the dog, Rick, when it is time, when he feels like he's completed his mission, I guess. And I will have peace knowing that I've done everything that I can as his mom. So there won't be any guilt. It will just be pure sadness. Just pure sadness and missing him and trying to lead a life with that hole. One of the best things that a mom said, she had a son that died of mito, and I said, how do you go on? And she said, I did this, my son, for all those years, and I'm okay. We miss him, but I'm okay. And I feel like that, I hope to be me, that I just know that I will be okay in terms of there will be no regrets. It will just be sadness and just my heart broken and missing, him dearly.
For me, the most important part of the good parent research is evidence that good parent beliefs, which you now know you can influence while parents are actively caring for their children, also impact a parent's grief. This is very, very, very true for me and how I remember the decisions my husband and I made for Ben. The what, where, and how to treat or not to treat have been central to how my husband and I feel following his death and the 8 years that have followed. I know that because our palliative care doctor was next to us in those final years, listening to us, empowering us as decision makers, considering our goals, seeing and valuing the whole of my son, the whole of my family, has made it so that we have no regrets. And this freedom from regret has allowed our memories to remain intact and our hearts to be open to finding ways to continue our bond with our son, Ben. But most importantly, it has allowed my husband and I to always, always, always see ourselves as the good parents that we were to Ben. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to start a dialogue about the ways to walk with families. And I look forward to speaking with you more during our question and answer time to talk about how feelings of good parenting impacted my life and my son, Ben, and to the things that I see at Courageous Parents Network as we journey with other families. Thank you again.
Hello, and thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. That was an incredible and really, really moving talk. I also want to encourage and invite people in the audience that they can submit questions on the chat box on the right of the screen, and I will incorporate them into our conversation as best as I can as they come in. And I have a host of questions. It is really a wonderful talk, and I'm trying to think of where to start. I guess maybe one thing to ask about that you didn't really talk about your own on your own journey is your journey to being an advocate and being involved with Courageous Parent Network. So I wonder if you could talk about that. A lot of members of our society are parents or patients or family members, and they're part of INPCS because they are interested in advocacy and want to be advocates. So maybe tell us about how you got involved with Courageous Parents Network and how that's incorporated into how you make sense of all this.
Sure. So my son Ben was diagnosed in 1997, which seems like eons ago now. And it certainly is when you look at the science in his disease and where that has evolved to. There's now actually a gene therapy in trial. So it's a long path. And my husband and I found fundraising a panacea for the reality that we were facing, which was our son was diagnosed with Sanfilippo syndrome. It's degenerative, and it is still to this day a terminal diagnosis. So, and he was 15 months old, which was very, very young in his era for a child to be diagnosed with his disease. So he was sort of an exceptionality for which we didn't necessarily have peers, and we weren't wanting to look in the future. So we got very actively involved in our disease space, specifically raising money and learning about different therapies that were out there, and remained really involved in that until the end of his life. He passed away when he was 17. So we really, saw the trajectory of the disease at its fullest. By the time he passed away, he wasn't able-bodied really at all. He couldn't stand or support his own weight. So just on a personal level, we had that. But as I said in my talk, when Ben was about, I don't know, maybe like 14 or 15, he had developed a very serious curve of his spine, and we were debating fusing it. And that's when palliative care came into our lives. And I met our palliative care doctor, Dr. Pat O'Malley. She happened to be friendly with Blythe Lord, the founder of Courageous Parents Network. And at Courageous Parents Network, we really focus on advocating for and educating to palliative care. So what is it? How can families ask for it? And I was one of those early interviews that CPN did. Blythe came and interviewed my husband and I both with Pat O'Malley, our palliative care doctor, to really talk about what that experience was and how it changed our perspective and our care for Ben, and helped us sort of hone what we instinctually sort of had been developing for years as our own goals of care. But really, I would say that Pat really helped us clarify those things for us, our palliative care doctor. And that's how I came to CPN and left my career and now work full-time for CPN. And I really look at it as a way of my ability to continue my bond with Ben and extend my, as I spoke about in my presentation, good parenting. It's a way for me to extend that good parenting feeling and identity and bring it to other people.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Did you have, were there parents in your journey or peers in your journey who served that role for you? Or was it really more healthcare professionals?
I think I had a few unique parents who helped to inform that path for us. And again, I will be honest and say my husband and I had a lot of blinders on early on in Ben's life, just focusing on the funding and not sort of looking at the future. And with Sanfilippo, that can be so varied, and it isn't always helpful to see that when you have a child with a neurologically based disorder, especially one that is progressive in nature. You don't always need to see what's coming tomorrow. It's one of the reasons why I also love Courageous Parents Network. It's all there, but if you don't sort of want to look below the fold, I say, and that dates me because we don't talk about newspaper terms anymore, but if you don't want to look at what's below the fold, it's usually some of the scarier topics, end of life issues that are coming that sort of you have to scroll down on your computer screen to see them. So I was definitely one of those parents that didn't want to look to the future. And I can't honestly say that I had good providers accompanying me, especially earlier in the journey, not until palliative care came on board. My personal experience is that my pediatrician sort of walked away from us. We got too complex It was okay. You know, I had to go there once a year to get my, you know, Ben's shots and in the sort of routine things. And in some ways, going to the pediatrician became very insulting because that person should be the conduit. That person sees my other two children, you know, knows my family since birth of all my children. They really have the access point. They really should. I think pediatricians really should be like the quarterback of a family's team. But my experience and what I hear at CPN is most of them back away, and then families are left without a quarterback. And for me, that came when I got linked into palliative care, which again, as I say, was way too late in the process.
Yeah. And that actually is a pretty common story. And it's true in adults with neurologic disorders as well, is that the primary care physician is overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. And sometimes people need a different medical home. And that medical home could be palliative care, could be neuropalliative care. It does tie into one of the questions that we have from the audience, which is, what would you say are the biggest gaps in support resources available for parents walking a similar path to the one you walked? And specifically, non-medical resources.
Yeah, so at Courageous Parents Network, that's why we actually exist, because Blythe saw a gap early on that parents don't get the psychosocial and emotional support and guidance that they need along the path, or that it's very hard to unearth it. And that families by and large, are not having those conversations with the medical providers that are in front of them. And I know I'm talking to palliative minded doctors at the moment. So I say that with some hesitation, just because, you know, we don't get the opportunity all the time to work with a palliative minded doctor. And also we don't get those opportunities out in the community, right? It's hard to find your palliative minded friends and your school, even the people in your school that can think through your goals of care with you, alongside of you. And they have to, because they're the people dealing with your child every day. But, you know, so CPN came on board so that families could find those resources and find them from the people they trust the most, which is other parents, right? You always want to listen to another parent above and beyond anything. And then what we sort of stumbled into was there were a lot of providers that needed to come and hear those voices too, and learn that language. I mean, one of my most memorable times was giving grand rounds and having a physician say to me, before I deliver a diagnosis, I go on to CPN and I watch some of the videos that you have around that experience, and I remember what language I'm supposed to use and not use. And he likened it to, like, before you go, and I don't know, maybe I don't want to say giving a tracheostomy, but doing some medical procedure. Often he said, I will watch a video to get like a little refresher. And he's like, that's what I try to do here. I try to go and learn this. And I really think the dialogue is about equipping people with the language. We really want to equip families. They can ask. You don't have to have a palliative care doctor to have somebody speak to you in that way, and to consider your goals. You can actually ask every single one of your specialists to travel that with you. They might not be able to, because they're, you know, some specialists are very sort of closed up to that. I know when my son needed spinal fusion surgery, the surgeon just wanted to do that. He didn't want to look at the whole of my child. He knew he could just cut his spine open, put a rod in, it'd be great. But, you know, he had dystonia. That wasn't going to stop the pulling, or, you know, so we need providers. We can look for providers everywhere who can be palliative. It was actually my GI doctor that got me the referral to palliative care.
In that process, is there, you talk about, you know, kind of like a cheat sheet almost for physicians to use, and I agree with you. I mean, there's been papers talking about communication is our procedure, and it's a delicate procedure, and you do want to do it right, and there's, you know, harm that can be done if it's not done right. I'm wondering if there's equivalent things for patients, for family members, for parents. Are there tips or tricks or suggestions that you have for them to, if they're not seeing a palliative doctor, to maybe upskill their doctor to get goals on the table to help their children be seen as a person, to get that kind of care from people who may not have that natural instinct?
Yeah, so at Courageous Parents Network, we have a robust library of guides. One of them is on approaching a family meeting. We have guides on shared decision-making. We have guides on a lot of the major medical interventions that kids with neurological or rare diseases face, spinal fusion, tracheostomy, feeding tube issue, feeding issues. And all of these guides are there to, and have reminders in them about establishing, how are you are your child's best advocate, and you are the expert, and you need to remember that. And you can bring and challenge doctors, and we try to give them the language to sort of say, you can equip yourself to ask this question. And then equally in our provider portal, we have guides and even little scripts that physicians can use to help families talk about goals of care, approach end of life, to introduce Courageous Parents Network so that the family can go then and watch it and learn and learn themselves, to empower themselves to have these skills. So yeah, we have a lot of resources out there to equip families. The biggest one being all our videos, because really families learn by listening to other families.
Sure. There's a question from the audience. How would you describe the process of learning his diagnosis? And what would you say to clinicians that might help them when they are communicating a child's diagnosis to family?
Yeah, so my son Ben was atypical in that he had a febrile seizure that sent us to the hospital, which resulted in a CAT scan. He has a naturally big head, because so do I, but the seizure along with a big head and then a CAT scan that showed some storage in his brain actually was what it turned out to be, led to a diagnosis. So he presented like a typical 15-month-old at the time. In retrospect, he had all the markers like, ear infections and all the other things that come along with his disease. So I guess delivering the diagnosis, I mean, mine was delivered in a very poor form in my pediatrician's office on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And I got a diagnosis at 4 p.m. and I went home, and I went home with no resources because it was a long weekend and I didn't have a chance to see a therapist or do all of those things. And I think keeping, when you deliver a diagnosis and the resources that you have at hand equally. One resource I got handed was something that the person had never called, and when I called it, it wasn't a good experience. So, I think when you deliver a diagnosis, you definitely want to make sure that you're setting the stage as best as you can. And then I think being very gentle, and I tell families this a lot when they call me, you don't need to know everything all at once. So the family sitting in front of you doesn't need to know everything about that diagnosis all at once. They may need to know critical things like, if you have a child diagnosed with SMA, of course you need to know what the research is that's out there right away. But in the case of Sanfilippo, yes, there's gene therapy, so you would want to talk about that if the child was applicable. But they don't need to see necessarily at 15 months old. I didn't need to see that Ben was going to go through this manic phase and get dementia and be in a wheelchair. I didn't need to know that part of the disease. So it's really about tempering. And then I'd say it's not about, your job isn't done once you deliver the diagnosis. It's really only just begun. Even if you're the genetic counselor that's there with them, there are plenty of opportunities along the family journey path where the genetic counselor should be checking in and helping the family sort of manage and navigate those emotional issues, or can be instrumental. I mean, a good example of that would be my other 2 children are carriers, and at some point I had to have that discussion with them because they're adults now, but in their teen years, and I could have used the advice of a genetic counselor then as well.
Ties into 2 questions I had, but I'll start with the first one, because you mentioned genetic counselor, but I'm curious to hear who else on kind of the extended team do you think is important? So we have our palliative care physician, sounds like genetic counselors. Were there other social work chaplains, therapists? Are there other people that you feel are really key to supporting a parent and a family going through this journey?
So I think bringing in a knowledgeable social worker can be very critical because you have to access a lot of social services when your child has a complex disease. So getting attuned to one that's, especially one that's out in the community, hospital-based social workers sometimes have better knowledge of what resources are available within the hospital as opposed to externally, is really vital. I think lining up a good team of therapists, because the people that families deal with on a day-to-day basis are usually the physical therapist, the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, all those home, sort of home-based or school-based things that we are accessing. So sort of getting that team of players together can be very helpful. And I found it very helpful that my orthopedist was able to be a segue to some of those good physical therapists, which were critical for my son along his journey. So there was a partnership there that worked really well for me. I think those are the main players that I would put on my team. I mean, the first thing, complex care coordinator, sometimes it depends. Some of these things are relative to what's available in the area that you live in. Palliative care isn't everywhere. Complex care isn't everywhere. I definitely think one of the first things I tell families to do after a diagnosis is sit down with your pediatrician and try to outline what you think you're going to need and see if they're up for the challenge. And if not, try to find somebody else who is.
And I guess a couple more questions. So one is for people without palliative care in their area, and there are a lot of parts of the country where there's not outpatient pediatric palliative care. What have you learned along the way, and what advice do you have people who are in that situation?
Yeah, that's really challenging because and we struggle with this a lot at CPN, right? Because there's not access to palliative care for everybody. So I will say, look for your champion. In the example of Blythe, it was her pediatrician who really had those goals of care conversations with her. And so she didn't really access a official palliative care doctor during her journey. She relied on her pediatrician. For me, my access point into palliative care came through my GI doctor originally. And so so I try to point out to families that it doesn't always have to be somebody who has that in their title, that you can find them. And I spend a lot of time talking with families about developing their own sort of palliative voice. In other words, what are their goals of care? How do they feel about it? And bring that to everybody they talk to, the teachers, the physical therapist, anybody who's touching their child, to have those conversations with them, because you may find a champion somewhere that you're not thinking of. And obviously you want one in the medical system, because that's how you're going to get better care overall medically for your child. But if you can find a physical therapist who's willing to come to the hospital and advocate with you, or a teacher who's willing to come and be that voice when you need the extra buffer, it can help you find the person within the medical system. You just have to keep asking, and you have to hope you come across physicians who have educated themselves to helping families find it, even if they can't be it. Like, my spinal surgeon was never going to be that, but he might have been good enough to point me in the direction of towards palliative care.
Yeah, let me, and I'll just ask one more last question, and then we'll get wrap up. But you mentioned, and I underlined it in my notes, kind of the value of having somebody who can accompany you on this journey. And that is, I think, one of the gifts of palliative care, that, we kind of describe all the things that palliative care people do, but a lot of times it's just being with you on the journey. And feedback I've gotten from people is that they're glad they got palliative care, they got it too late. And sometimes I hear from people that, but had you offered it to me earlier, I might not have taken it. And so I guess my question for you to end on is what thoughts or ideas or suggestions do you have for helping people be open to palliative care and the support of palliative care earlier in the journey?
Yeah, so we hear that all the time at CPN. We hear families both say they probably would have been fearful of palliative care because for many, unfortunately, the association is around death. It's not really about living well. And we need to do a lot to dispel that myth. And we work a lot at CPN to do that. But again, I think it's a little bit like delivering the diagnosis. It's about who introduces it and how they introduce the concept of palliative care that really matters. And that's got to be a little hard when you're in the space of palliative care because you're relying on people who aren't as well trained or aren't necessarily in the know who make the referrals. So we spend a lot of time trying to talk to this nurse, the people that might be making that referral to palliative care so that we can help them be more comfortable with it. It's kind of funny that physicians can be so uncomfortable around the topics and the people that might really benefit from palliative care because you're in this space, like you're treating medical issues, but it's human nature to be uncomfortable with the fact that a child might not live or that this, the outcome here is going to be long and hard and arduous and not so pretty at the very end. It's the natural instinct not to. So I think we just have to keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the best thing we can do and getting people comfortable with it and not just saving it for, I think if you can introduce it, well, like if somebody had introduced it to me with Ben in a soft and gentle way and said, this person is going to have a conversation with you about what you hope for with him, then I might have approached it differently. And because that's all they needed to do in the beginning, right? Was to say, what do you hope for Ben? What are you most worried about today on this day? And when he was 15 months old, I would have said, I want him to talk so he knows he can communicate with me. And that would have been enough. That's all palliative care would have needed to do is hear that and maybe say, go find this resource, and this resource, but then a check-in every once in a while. Instead, it came when we were literally talking about a life or death situation with my son. And so the myth gets sort of carried over and perpetuated because of the way we introduce it and when.
Right. Well, I could, I could go on with other questions, but we're at time and very, very inspirational talk. Took a lot of notes. It's given me a lot to think about. I hope to have further conversations with you and the Courageous Parents Network moving forward. And thank you again so much for the work that you do and for spending time with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And please try to visit Courageous Parents Network. And if you need anything, just email that address and you'll always get to me. There's only a handful of us on staff, so it'll get there.
That's good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.